Hi, my name is David Oat, and I'm the cemetery and the burial ground historian for the Norwich Historical Society. This morning, we're going to take a walk through the old city cemetery. It's also referred to as the Oak Street Cemetery. And I'd like to point out some of the more interesting people that are buried here. Today's walk is hosted by the Norwich Historical Society, and it's actually part of our second Saturday programs. Norwich was founded in 1659, and as the farms grew and prospered over the years, small communities grew up in the 9-mile square. So by 1700s, you had various sections of Norwich which had broken away to form their own societies. In 1755, the people who lived in the Chelsea section of Norwich petitioned the magistrates in Hartford to form their own society, and they were granted that right. So in 1755, the 6th Society, or the Chelsea Society, was formed in downtown Norwich. The church, which was eventually built on Church Street, and the cemetery, or the burial ground, which is what they were called in the 1700s, was located right here, just a little ways from what is now Cliff Street. They were able to buy 1.5 acres of land and used it for the first graveyard here in what is now called the city cemetery. Over the years, more acreage was added, so that now the cemetery stretches between the Cliff Street side all the way to the north and borders on Oak Street. So now we're standing at the extreme north end of the city cemetery. And by the way, the city cemetery is the official name for this cemetery, but you will often hear the term Oak Street Cemetery, which is very popular. And the reason for that is because the gate on the north end of the city cemetery opens onto Oak Street. But the official name is City Cemetery. So now we're standing in the 1800s section of the city cemetery, and right in front of this large Vermont marble obelisk, which belongs to James Landmann. James was born June 14th, 1867, and he was a well-noted person in Norwich. He was an attorney. He served as a member of the Connecticut State House of Representatives. He was a delegate to the Connecticut State Constitutional Convention in 1818, and he was a member of the Connecticut State Senate the following year. James was elected to the United States Senate, and he served from 1819 until 1825. He was also a state court judge, and he was a mayor of Norwich, Connecticut in 1831. So this is the tombstone for Civil War soldier George W. Ward. And you can see by the shape of the stone, this is a Vermont marble tombstone, and it's a government issue. These are the standard headstones that the U.S. government issues for veterans to be used on their gravesites. So George Ward was an organist and a music teacher here in Norwich when the Civil War broke out, and he volunteered for the 18th Regiment, Connecticut's volunteers. He was 26 years old. On June 1863, he was involved in the Battle of Winchester, just like Joseph Forster was. He was one of the soldiers that was captured by the Confederate Army, and he spent some time in Belle Island Prison, which is in Richmond, Virginia. From there, He was sent off to Danville prison, also in Virginia. And after his stay in Danville, he was sent down to Georgia and imprisoned in Andersonville, where he was confined for 21 months. During that time, he suffered ill health, all of the health effects, deterioration of his body due to hunger, mistreatment, and so forth. And as I mentioned, after 21 months in Andersonville, the mistreatment and the ill health brought him to his grave. He died February 26, 1865, and he was 29 years old. So during the Civil War, the people in Norwich made a pledge that any of their soldiers that fell during the fighting, their bodies would be retrieved and brought back to Norwich so they could be buried on home ground. So following the Civil War on January 2nd, 1866, a man by the name of George W. Smith, who lived on 7 Cliff Street here in Norwich, departed the town and headed down to Andersonville in an attempt to retrieve the remains of 15 Norwich soldiers who were known to have died in the prison. He returned late that month with 9 soldiers whose remains had positively been identified. There were 6 others that could not be identified. And when the bodies came back to Norwich, there was a huge celebration up in the Yantic Cemetery, where they had reserved a circle in the Yantic Cemetery to inter the soldiers who had died at Andersonville. There were 7 of these soldiers put in that circle. George Ward's family had this plot in the city cemetery, so his remains were brought here to be buried. And Winshifts, one of the other soldiers that died at Andersonville, his body is in the Yantic Cemetery, although it's not in the soldiers' circle. So Calvin Goddard was another well-known attorney in the city of Norwich. He was born July 17th, 1768, and he served as a member of the Connecticut State House of Representatives in 1795. He was elected to represent Connecticut's 3rd District and was what they called an at-large in the United States House of Representatives, where he served from 1801 till 1805. Calvin was also a mayor of the city of Norwich in 1814, and he sat on the state court as a judge in 1815. So what is considered to be the first civil rights case in the United States, Calvin defended Prudence Crandall in the 1833 trial, where she was brought up on charges against Connecticut's black law, which prohibited the teaching of out-of-state black students. He defended the case twice before the Supreme Court in Connecticut, and eventually the court decided to throw the case out. So that concludes our walking tour of the Oak Street or the City Cemetery this morning. If you find this interesting and fascinating, as I do, I would encourage you to come and visit some of the burial grounds and the cemeteries here in Norwich. They are full of history. There is some of this country's first sculpture. If you take a look at the imagery on these old stones, you can see a chronology of religious beliefs and spiritual beliefs that people had as they lived through the 17, the 18, and up into the 1900s. So I guess I would say stay tuned. We'll have some more future videos of various individuals in the Norwich City cemeteries and burial grounds. And I would encourage you to go to the Norwich Historical Society Facebook page, like us, And stay tuned.